Alrighty, 16 weeks ago, the sun was unbearable, Dan. And we kickstarted this 34 Waggle edition of the PIAA High School Football Report. Never thought we'd get to this point, but we are now hours away from PIAA Championship weekend. 3 festival-sized days at Cumberland Valley coming up. It's hard to believe, partner. Yes, we've witnessed tremendous performances, thrilling finishes, good concession fare on occasion, great band productions, all of it. We even picked up a rookie along the way here, and Mr. Evan Wheaton. So, Evan, how you doing, buddy?
Oh, doing fantastic. Looking forward to some great matchups.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun weekend. And again, it's at Cumberland Valley. It's in our backyard, which is nice. It was in Hershey, also in our backyard, which, Cumberland Valley's a little nicer. But anyway, we were going to welcome in our intrepid Brian Linder here, but we're going to save him for the next podcast to get you there. So, all right, let's run down what the next 30, 40 minutes are going to look like for audiences. Again, thanks so much for joining us here on the PIAA High School Football Report podcast. In case you have not been paying attention, shame on you, one Mid-Penn crew remains aligned for a state title, and that, of course, is the Steel High Rollers in Class Single A. Those fiery Rollers are back. Andrew Irby's club will open championship weekend on Thursday at a 1 p.m. Kickstart at Cumberland Valley against the undefeated Whitfield champion in Fort Cherry. We will dive very deep into that one coming up, but let's lay out the rest of the schedule for championship, the 3 days of championship week here. Following Steel High, Thursday night, of course, the Class 4A game. Whitfield champion Aliquippa makes their third straight appearance on the final. As you know, they lost to McDevitt last year. They did win it in 2021, so they are back for more to face upstart Dallas, the District 2 champ. Those guys upset Bishop McDevitt on Friday night in Northern Lehigh in the Fog Bowl, which we're referring it to, and we'll talk and give you an update on photographer Joe Hermit as well. It does. That might sound ominous, but it just was funnier. This one was funnier than the last one. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
The injury not so substantial. Moving on to Friday, December 8th. Obviously, we start with 2A, Southern Columbia. You might have heard of them. 13 state titles already, 6 straight, and now they get a rematch with Westinghouse, the District 8 Dynamo, who's really, really fun to watch, by the way.
Yeah.
At 1 o'clock on Friday, and of course 5A championship will be 7 o'clock on Friday night. Imhotep Charter, who has a lot of appearances in the state finals, but just one championship, so we'll talk a little bit about that too, against Whitfield champion Peters Township. Finishing up on Saturday, also 1 and 7 o'clock, the 1 o'clock game, 3A, Bell Vernon, defending champion, against Northwestern Lehigh. Those guys took out Wyomissing in a absolute surge second half to make it to the final. And then, of course, 6A, St. Joe's Prep, the benchmark, if you will. I don't know how many times in a row they've been here, but it's I don't know, since 2013, I think it's all but 1 year that they've made it to this. So they'll be looking for more hardware, too, and they're going to play the Whitfield champion, North Allegheny, which took out Harrisburg, and we will get into that one, too, as well. So guys, before we get into the championship games, let's take a little quick step back. Well, first of all, championship games. Which games are you most looking forward to? I know we've only had a few days to kind of digest what happened on semifinal weekend, and looking ahead to the championship, we still have about a day and a half until all of that kicks off with the Rollers. But what game, Dan, are you looking forward to most?
I mean, I think, honestly, we are a Mid-Penn focused website, and we kind of
right.
It feels like it would be easy to kind of say I'm going to go somewhere else, but to me it is Steel High Fort Cherry. I was going back and forth a little bit with Mike White, who on Twitter is, for people in this area who don't know, probably one of the longest tenured high school sports reporters in the state of Pennsylvania. I don't think anyone is a more preeminent source on state championship football than Mike White. And I was just going back and forth because he was tweeting about Matt Sieg and Fort Cherry, and I kind of said this might be the best quarterback matchup of all 6 games, and it's crazy to get it from 1A. And he responded saying, this is one of the best quarterback matchups he can remember in any year he's ever covered the state championship games, which coming from Mike White says a lot. And you see why, right? Because it's the all-time state leading passer in state history in Alex Irby going against a guy who, might end up being top 10 in rushing when he's all done at quarterback in Matt Sieg. I think he's already got 4,000 career rushing yards as a sophomore. It's just such an intriguing matchup. Steel High's defense has been so underrated all year, but they haven't gone against a guy like Matt Sieg. They've gone against really good rushing attacks that feature traditional running offenses.
Right.
I'm so interested to see how this team handles kind of that shifty quarterback out of the backfield that you just can't corral quickly. Because I think when we're going to talk about the Harrisburg-North Allegheny game, that was something Harrisburg really struggled with was Logan Kushner and kind of being able to handle his legs. It's always just a different aspect trying to deal with that kind of stuff. And then on the flip side, Steel High's offense, after kind of the scare a couple weeks ago, has looked really good again. And Alex Irby is as experienced as he can be at this stage of football. It's just such an interesting matchup, and I really think that the Mid-Penn lucked out in terms of this. They didn't luck out in a couple other 50-50 games on Friday, but to get this matchup, I think Mid-Penn football fans are in for a real treat.
Definitely agree. I think, even though we cover Mid-Penn, that is, I think, the best matchup, or at least the most intriguing one because of that quarterback matchup. Matt Sieg is, as a sophomore, he's, I'm looking at it right now, 1,650 passing yards, 20 touchdowns, 3 INT. On the ground, over 4,000 career rushing yards. He's the third in school history for that, for Fort Cherry. 2,234 rushing yards on the ground. 39 touchdowns, averaging 9.8 per carry. He's, as a sophomore, his first college offer from Penn State.
Right.
He's the real deal.
Not bad, yeah.
It's going to be fun. Both are 15-0. Steel High obviously has a lot of experience. Fort Cherry, this is the first time they've won the Whippeal, first time they've reached the state tournament, and to go all the way in their first run through the PIAA bracket. They're not playing like they lack experience.
And again, also, and it's just also, it does go to show that, it is kind of a different sport, I feel like, than it was kind of a while ago, right? Where you can have these sophomore, freshman QBs that are just ready to come in right away and kind of dominate an offense and get programs that had never been there before to a state title game. And so it's a real, two different sides of the coin, right? Where the grizzled veteran Alex Irby, I'm sure I didn't cover his freshman year. I'm sure Ep feels like just yesterday he was covering freshman Alex Irby, and now he's the all-time passing leader in three state title games in 4 years. But it is really two sides of a coin in the experience column. It's
interesting you say that because the other day we were driving home and I was thinking, how many games have I covered, Alex Irby? And I'm, because they've had these long runs to state championships. I'm like,
might be your most covered athlete.
Maybe ever. Yeah. It's probably 25 or 30 games that I've seen him play in his career, and he's probably played I don't know, 50?
Yeah, we're not math.
Right? Yeah, we write for a living. We don't do math. But it's probably 70% of his games that I've witnessed in person. It's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to watch the Rollers. Everybody knows that. For me, guys, I agree with you. I think the 1A game is right there. I like the 3A game.
Yeah.
Saturday afternoon. Give me Quentin Martin, and I'm happy.
Yeah.
Give me a hot chocolate on the sidelines, and I get to watch Quentin Martin. I'm okay. I'm good to go.
Yeah.
And this Northwestern Lehigh defense is legit. And this is going to be, I don't know, it could be one of these tug of wars where it's like a 16-14 game.
Yeah.
If the elements hold up. I don't know. I haven't looked at the weather, potential weather for this week. But it looks like it's going to be at least okay.
Yeah.
So that could be a really good game, and it's one I'm really interested to. All right, let's revert back a little bit. We talked about Harrisburg and North Allegheny. Dan, you were at that game at the Ravens Den, a.k.a. Mansion Park Stadium in Altoona.
Yeah.
On Saturday for that semifinal. It just seemed to me, following you, watching it just that third quarter touchdown was something that, you almost felt like Harrisburg had to get the first points in the second half.
Yeah.
Even though it was, 17-6 at halftime.
Yeah. It was just a script that didn't feel good from the start because Harrisburg has been great about, not blinking when going down early. So I think they've been down in every one of their playoff games. Even against Cedar Crest, weren't they brief? They might have been briefly down in that game. So they've been good about that. But the way North Allegheny's fronts on both ends were winning that game felt different than a lot of these other games Harrisburg has played. That North Allegheny front is no joke, and it's one reason why I'm not picking them to beat St. Joe's Prep. But I think that they'll be more competitive than people think because they've got some big guys up there that can move it, that can move good defenders. But yeah, I thought Harrisburg had kind of captured a little bit of momentum with that late touchdown to Quincy Brandon. It was 17-0, get a 4th and goal stop at the 1, and then immediately score a touchdown. That felt like one of those Harrisburg inflection points where they kind of have these in these games where they can turn the game on a dime just with sheer will. Unfortunately, though, that North Allegheny running attack, I think Logan Kushner completed 1 pass all game.
Yeah.
But it was just run. They just kept them off balance, score that touchdown, and Harrisburg it was a tough adjustment for them to deal with pressure up the middle. I think Sean Lee could never really get his feet set. He was constantly on the run, couldn't really let the routes develop. That's why Elias Koch didn't have a catch till the 4th quarter. He drew a couple flags. I still kind of think, if they had that one back, they would have maybe been a little more aggressive early in the game trying to get him the ball because the couple times they did was a deep flag and a near diving catch. It was just an inch off. I would have tried to get him the ball more. He had a size advantage. But all the credit to North Allegheny. That is a football team there. And all the credit to Harrisburg. They hung in there with, again, this is a 6A team that does not have a 6A roster in terms of numbers. They are playing at such a disadvantage in terms of depth and in terms of what these kids have to do and in terms of what Calvin Everett has to get out of what he's given. It's a different game. Like they are smaller than a lot of these 4A schools going against the Cumberland Valley of Western PA pretty much in terms of school size, right?
Yep.
North Allegheny's got James Harrison Jr. on their team. They've got James Harrison, they've got Chris Hoke's son, they've got Tyson Oluwalu's son on their team. They've just got so much talent. And Harrisburg, and this is what Cal Everett said after the game. He said that all I can ask for my team is that they did not quit, that they kept battling, and there was never a point in that game where Harrisburg hung their head high. And that's kind of cliche. That's kind of, a little hack thing to say, oh, wow, they never gave up. But that game was truly Harrisburg not giving up and just kind of being, a little outmanned on the line. And I'll tell you what, Logan Kushner is a fun quarterback to watch.
Yeah.
I think he still doesn't have a college offer, which is crazy. He's a little small, and the passing wasn't there against Harrisburg. But man, that kid can move, and there's got to be a spot for him at some level. So I'm really looking forward to seeing. Like I said, I think St. Joe's Prep is going to win that game by multiple scores, 2-3 scores, but.
It'll be late.
Yeah,
it'll be pull away.
It would not shock me if North Allegheny keeps that game closer than people think. Like, there have been some 6A teams that have given them trouble. I think even a team like Central Dauphin was able to score a couple touchdowns on them a few years ago. We've seen people give them challenges. I think this North Allegheny team has a little bit of it. They had their fans come in with a "We Believe" sign,
right?
And I think that's kind of. Any team in 6A that's not St. Joe's Prep, you kind of have that mindset, right? Where you're kind of, it's us against the world, even if you're one of the biggest schools in PA, because that's what it feels like. But back to Harrisburg, that team is going to be right back there next year, like right back there, and maybe even in a better chance to win.
Yeah, you said the main thing that I saw, at least the amount of game that I saw, and Sean Lee's not afraid to stick in the pocket.
No.
But he was tucking so quickly to run the football, and that had everything to do with the pressure up the middle.
And it's up the middle. That's such a different pressure than just getting pressure off the edge. If you can get that's why Aaron Donald, when he was at his peak, was so valuable on the Rams, is because when a quarterback is facing pressure directly in his face, it makes them it's panic isn't the right word because it's not panic. Kind of implies it's irrational. It makes them kind of bail out and have to kind of improvise. And
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, great season at Harrisburg, and congratulations, North Allegheny. Art Walker I've covered Art Walker. You know, a state semifinal when Central Dauphin went out there to Mansion Park in 2011 and shocked the world and beat North Allegheny. That's when we started calling the Kodiak Bears instead of the Tigers, because they had these linemen who just looked like grizzly bears, and somehow Central Dauphin, whose line across the front probably averaged about, I want to say 225, 230 for a 4A. It was 4A then.
Yeah.
For a 4A program, somehow went out there in the snow and beat them, and it was shocking. Of course, North Allegheny snapped right back and won it back in 2012.
And Art Walker also made some comments after the game.
He did, yeah.
And I think you kind of have to go in with that mindset, right?
I think you're right. I think you need to go in with that chip.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just, why not?
Yeah, because it's not like if you don't say that, St. Joe's Prep isn't going to try.
Right, exactly.
It's not like you're giving them extra bulletin board material. I don't think St. Joe's Prep is a team that needs bulletin board material.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
They do not. All right, Evan, let's get to your game. You, of course, covered the Rollers. They are coming to Cumberland Valley for Thursday in the final. A big semifinal win for them. Tell me what you liked about the Rollers and obviously moving forward for Thursday.
Well, first off, I'll tell you what I like about Shamokin. Thank you, District 4, for feeding us.
Didn't I tell you? Shamokin takes care of you, brother.
Yep, a lot of those District 4 venues do, as I know from my time in that area.
You're right.
So that was nice. But, getting into the game, I said last week that, against Lackawanna Trail, this was kind of a good response for Steel High after a pretty tough Northern Bedford game.
Yep.
A little bit of a scare, and they came out and kind of reminded the world what they're capable of. I feel like this was kind of like an encore to that. Their first two offensive drives for Steel High ended in the end zone. Mm-hmm. And then, South Williamsport didn't pick up a first down until the second quarter. From that point on, it was just tempo was right with the Rollers. I will say, I think South Williamsport has been great on the ground all season, of course.
Mm-hmm.
With Kaiser Kistner, Ryan Casella, those guys have been great. But I thought they were actually passing the ball pretty well against Steel High. They had 3 big completions, kind of get back down into those red zone opportunities. But we talk about the offense a lot, but I liked what I was seeing from Eugene Green.
Yep.
When South Williamsport started to actually get in positions where they can move the ball against them, you get a 4th down stop from school's program sack leader,
That's right. Yep.
And it's, I think defense did a pretty good job for Steel High in that one as they've been, but obviously we look at that offense and what they're capable of.
Yeah, I mean, you always start with the offense. You have to. When you have Alex Serby there, 4-year starter, I think he is. He's now over 14,000 yards. And I mean, consider that when we were talking about the record being 11,084. So he's what is that? $2,000, $3,000, almost over the record now. I mean, it's really crazy to think of that. But you start with the offense because you have to talk about Ralph Caesar, Jr. You have to talk about Jayon Perry, who's a tremendous. Jayon Perry is one of these guys. I mention a lot in stories because he does a little bit of everything, and his skills as a D-back / it's almost like a hero back, and as a tackler too in space, and as a sort of a blitzer too, as a bandit. I mean, he just does so many things for them that sort of go unnoticed because you have Irby and you have Caesar and you have these guys and Burnett, who's over 1,000 yards. So. When you have that type of thing, you almost forget about the defense. And a guy like Tavon LeGrand, who's been really good all season, just goes out and cracks heads, on defense. And so there's so many moving parts to the Steel High team that are really good. So when you get up against these teams, like a Northern Bedford in bad weather, it's often your quote unquote supporting cast that kind of takes a step up and gets you through it. And again, Dan and I have talked about this a lot, about Steel High's most sort of endearing characteristic on this team. And I think I've been preaching that's it. Like, you never know. It always starts with Alex Serby, but you never know who else is going to be that sort of difference maker that takes you from maybe it's a 1-score game to a 3-score game.
I think J.M. Perry's in particular, has had a pretty tremendous postseason.
He's been great.
Well, I mean, he's a guy that every postseason postseason of his career has been that guy.
I mean, he's a 4-year starter too. Like
Yeah.
he started. I remember covering him as a freshman.
Yeah, and like, I think it's easy, obviously, because this is how football works. You look at those 2 state championships, and you look at the quarterback first, and you look at Alex Irving, you look at all his stats and everything. Those state titles, particularly the last one, was won on the defensive side of the football.
Yep.
And J.M. Perry was as big of a reason. It was him and Marquise Beasley dominated that game. Just completely dominated, and it came up with huge plays against Union when the offense was kind of up and down all day. It was kind of a chilly, gray day, and J.M. Perry was just everywhere. And that's why I think when you mention J.M. Perry, I think he is going to be the X factor this week, because he is the guy that I think is most capable on that defense of kind of just Andrew Irby just telling him, "Hey, Jayon, your eyes are on Matt Sieg the entire ball game. You are not leaving that kid's sight," because I think he can track him down. He can be that sort of spy linebacker.
One more thing about J.M. Perry. I mean, it's almost funny. You know, against South Williamsport, it looked like a direct snap kind of went awry, and he picked up the ball, and it ended up being him running to the house for 70 yards. So in a rare moment of discombobulation, he's still getting a giant 70-yard scoring play.
Yeah.
It's like,
and they've got 5 guys who could do that, but Perry seems to do it week in and week out. He comes up with something to keep the train going. All right, we're not going to do much on Bishop McDevitt before we get to the championships, but we'll unpack a little bit about McDevitt. Up at Northern Lehigh Friday night against District 2 champ in Dallas. First of all, in the game that I saw, obviously a lot went wrong for Bishop McDevitt, but a lot of it was because Dallas, you just tip your cap to these guys. The Mountaineers just played with so much heart, and they were so prepared to play this football team. And, as Coach Manella put it, this roster, he had a few things to say at the end. But again, I don't think anybody took it the wrong way. I think he was right to just sort of praise his guys, his community guys, But special teams were obviously a horror show for Bishop McDevitt all night. The weather was not great, but, it wasn't terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the ball was, as slick as it sort of the weather looked. But this game went to double overtime, and McDevitt had the ball in first and in second OT, and couldn't get anything going, and trotted in Lulinda, the kicker, for a short field goal, and it was sort of a very slow, kind of lazy snap. Chase Reagan, who's the holder, couldn't get it on the block, and basically, Lulinda just kicked it in right into the middle of the pressure, and then it was to me, I was a little bit taken back that Dallas trotted in their kicker on second down.
Yeah.
On their, I thought it was second and goal from the 8. Geske had run for 2 yards, and but they trotted him in, and Laubach hit the field goal to beat them. I just thought McDevitt sort of lost their way a little bit offensively. And again, there was so much pressure coming from him. Stone Saunders was sacked a couple times in the first half. He injured his leg on a block punt that went the other way. And I just think that, not utilizing the middle of the field, I think, was a problem for Bishop McDevitt. And it just wasn't even when Stone completed a pass, it wasn't like he was set.
Yeah.
His feet were never set, and again, I'm not saying this was Stone's fault, but there was a lot of pressure on him, and it was all coming from the edges off Dallas. They went pursuit. They blitzed probably 75 to 80% of the time, and just kept the pressure on and held McDevitt's rushing attack between Maurice Barnes and Nazir Jones-Davis to those 3 and 4 yard gains, and sometimes on first down they get 1. And that was such a benefit for Dallas, whose defensive backs were just fast enough, just good enough to sort of defend what McDevitt was doing scheme-wise with a lot of curl routes and things like that.
Well, and you kind of wonder now, this is all hindsight, all revision.
Right.
You go back to those first 3 games of the year, and 2 of them were kind of, tight football games, right? And we thought that those were, class of those states, right? That they were going to be 2 of the top teams in the. Those teams ended up being, a little up and down, not as good as we thought they would be. They did blow out LaSalle, which was a good win, but LaSalle was not that state championship level team this year either. You kind of go back and look and wonder, man, do you think maybe they would benefit? They will benefit from this proposed move to the Commonwealth. You think maybe this team needs a little bit more of a ramp up period when they aren't like a step when they aren't last year's team. I think was probably, you could argue, maybe the best Bishop McDevitt football team that has ever that in terms of just pure talent. So many guys on that team. You have 2 SEC wide receivers, an SEC quarterback. You got an offensive line full of Division I players. You got defensive players who are going Division I. One of the most stacked teams. This year they were a really good football team, but when you're not at that insane level of football, do you need those kind of? Is it tough to go from the Keystone level to going up against Manheim Central and going up against Dallas, teams that are going to be at a different level schematically and a different level even talent-wise?
Yeah, I think to put it differently, you're wondering, is the 7 weeks of just walking through games help you? And I would agree with that mostly.
Yeah.
But I also thought the fact that Manheim Central dug in them and said, and gave them a game a week before.
Kind of maybe exposed some.
I thought that would have triggered Bishop McDevitt to say, listen, this is what we need to do. We need to get back to, And again, it all comes down to you've got to get the ball to, your Alabama recruit. You've got to get him the ball, and he had 6 catches.
Yeah.
Okay. You've got to get sort of, I thought maybe they could have utilized Jonte Quick a little bit more. Oh, but again, this is all after. It's all hindsight.
Yeah, we're not football.
Right.
Jeff Wechter knows more about football
exactly.
Than we know. We'll know in 100 years.
And at the and again at the root of all this was the pressure that Dallas was putting on them. And I do absolutely think McDevitt underestimated him. I think I know I underestimated Dallas. I was probably 2 weeks late to the party to bring them into the rankings.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To be honest with you. But, it's just one of those things that things just kept snowballing and nothing really got right for McDevitt.
Yeah.
When it was snowballing. You normally get let's just throw it up to Rico. Or let's you expect McDevitt to make that play. They made that play against Manheim Central to get by. This Dallas prevented them from making that play.
Yeah.
They did till the end.
Yeah.
Till they blocked the field goal.
And now McDevitt, they'll be back next year, assuming everyone's still back. But they do lose. They lose some key players.
You lose a good chunk, yeah.
Especially that wide receiver core. That's going to be something that's going to be really interesting to watch. I think you mentioned the name that's going to be probably the next big name for McDevitt, assuming there are no new names in. Jonte Quick, I think, will be a guy that emerges. But it's been it's been fun to watch Rico Stock. Kind of, I thought that last year he was a guy with a lot of traits, but didn't really blow up, I think, the way everyone thought he did. And I think this year he kind of figured out, because again, he's only been playing wide receiver for 3 years.
Yeah, right.
So I'm excited to see him at the next level as well.
Yeah, it's a hell of a season, a heck of a season for Bishop McDevitt. It's just, where they wanted to end up. So it's just okay. All right, so let's get back to the Rollers, Dan.
Yeah.
If we had to pick, let's call it the X factor.
Yeah.
The one thing that Steel High really has to do well to win a second straight title.
Is it lazy to say penalties?
No, that's part of the game.
I think that when Steel High gets in trouble in these football games, it's when they're kind of hurting themselves, right? When they're kind of because I think Steel High has had games this year with double-digit penalties.
Oh yeah,
and those are things that it doesn't really matter who your opponent is. Like your opponent can kind of draw some penalties out of you. But if you're jumping off sides against Matt Sieg, a 2nd and 5 to him, that's like a 2nd and 5 to that Eagles offense or whatever, where
Right.
you can just run for 5 yards in a second. So I think that with that, I just think you have to keep a clean game.
Yeah. No, I agree. Evan?
I think, talk about penalties, my mind immediately goes to that West Perry game. I think they had, 17 penalties?
It was a lot.
It was
Yeah.
a breathtaking amount for both sides. But, a lot of times Steel High kind of gets into foul trouble. And obviously they're able to overcome it, the 15-0.
Right.
But, against a team like Fort Cherry, I think an X factor is going to be trying to limit those mistakes and try to play clean. And, against Fort Cherry, they're going to, I feel like the margin of error this time around is going to be so razor thin.
Yeah, I agree. For me, I think it's and again, this is hard. It's hard for me to say this because I've seen Steel High so many times, and I know they like to play wide open defensively. But to me, they have to be a little bit more disciplined defensively with their assignments,
especially
because go ahead.
Quarterback. These mobile quarterbacks
Yes.
are where that kills you, right?
Right.
You cannot overcommit. You just can't.
No.
You have to get them to stop, get them to be on their back feet, 2 legs planted, back feet.
Yeah.
Make sure that if they're still 1 leg forward, 1 leg back, and they can shift and juke, and you're diving at them full force, guys like Matt Sieg are going to make you miss.
Yep, absolutely. And another thing, Sieg's going to obviously really good at sticking his leg and sticking his foot in the ground and cutting up. He's really shifty. And number 2 is I've watched enough film on the Rangers to know they pull a lot.
Yeah.
They pull a lot. So if you're already running yourself upfield because you want to kill the quarterback, you know what I mean? And your assignment is obviously to wall that off, they're just going to kick you right out and run right underneath you. And I've seen it happen. And again, nothing against Eugene Green has been great. Yeah. Nothing against Andrew Irby Jr. has been great. But there is a tendency to be over aggressive at times, and certainly in in key situations where you do want to kind of sit, and I think Fort Cherry's a team that can exploit that if you allow it to happen. So to me, if Steel High just plays a little bit more not more because they have been really good. But just stays that because we've seen chunk plays against the Steel High defense. We've seen points put up against the Steel High defense. And Sieg's a guy that can put up the points and run right through you. So I'd be interested to see how the defensive front for Steel High handles this. And I'll tell you what, Fort Cherry, their front guys are going to give up some size, but they get off the ball fast. Their offensive line gets off the ball very quickly. Yeah. And again, sometimes you have 2 guys pulling and not just 1. So Steel High has to be aware of that. That'll be the key for them, in my opinion. A couple other games, Dan, before we get going here. What do you like about Southern Columbia, I guess we could sort of talk about, but that game sort of takes care of itself. It's a rematch of last year. And again,
I'm thinking that it's gonna be a close game. I mean, last year's game wasn't a blowout.
It was 37-22 last year.
It was a close game, and I think this Southern Columbia team, from obviously not seen them in person, and I don't want the Southern Columbia fan base to get mad, catch wind of this and get mad at me. But I think that Westinghouse team has the capability to pull off. They don't have. Keyshawn Marcel last year was a really fun story.
Right.
This is quarterback that kind of emerged. But they've got plenty of talent this year. I know that Keyshawn Robinson people rave about that kid. And, Southern Columbia they've not looked the same level of dominant on offense. The defense has been great this year.
They have been tremendous.
And they're playing their best football. And I don't think I'm going to pick Southern Columbia to lose, but I think I might pick Westinghouse to cover your. I think it's.
I hadn't put out projected yet.
Yeah, 6 straight, 13 overall. I mean, it's the high school football dynasty of dynasties in Pennsylvania. So I mean, I think I agree with Dan about cover, but I would pick Southern Columbia.
It's the gladiator syndrome, Dan. We talk about it sometimes.
Yeah.
They got such a history. It's such a I mean, I don't know what they are in finals. I don't know. It's like
it feels like if they get to the final,
well, what do they
win.
have? They have 13 titles.
Yeah, I think
so they're 13-8, maybe in
that's the most.
championships.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been to 21. I mean, it's just
mind-numbing.
it's hard. But I will say this: Westinghouse is fun to watch. Yeah. So if Westinghouse can somehow, Dan, get into the second half, a touchdown down.
Yeah.
If they, you know what I mean, they can't. It's just if Southern Columbia is allowed to pin their ears back when they're up 14-0, it's going to get crazy.
Yeah.
It'll get really bad.
I mean, they don't have. I mean, Wisławski last year was such a big part of what Southern Columbia did.
Oh yeah.
And so, I just have this feeling. I have a feeling it's going to be a really close game.
Well, that would be. I think everybody would be fine with that.
And if it's not, Megan, I'll ask you to delete this from the Spotify recording.
You know this is going up Wednesday, right?
We can edit after the game's over.
Yeah, we'll be fine. We'll be
Yes,
fine.
this will be on YouTube, everybody.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk, Evan. Who do you want to see? Who do you want to watch? As individuals. I mean, you have obviously 6 pretty intriguing matchups. I mean, I'm actually very excited about this. There were a few last year. I was like, there might not be great matchups, and they didn't prove to be. But I'm actually intrigued by this schedule over 3 days. I like all of them.
I'll tell you, day one is going to set a high bar.
Day one's going to be fun.
Dan and I were just talking about how we're most excited for that Steel High Fort Cherry matchup. But
Yep.
then you look at 4A, I'm excited to just watch Dallas. You know, obviously you got Aliquip on the other side, but Dallas has been a pretty tough out. These past 2 wins of theirs going into OT, being able to knock out McDevitt.
Yep.
I mean, you put Steel High, Fort Cherry, and Dallas now Aliquip in the same day. I mean, that's day one of this thing's going to be pretty cool.
Keep in mind, too, how the last time Dallas made it, they beat Imhotep.
Yep. The
So
Giant Slayers.
that's right. The Giant Slayers. Or what was the Dragon one?
Dragon, that was
That's
Drew
Drew Brandstetter.
That was Drew Brandstetter, the Dragon
Dragon
Slayer.
Slayer.
Great. That's
Coolest nickname.
fantastic. Dan, anybody you're interested individual-wise over the next 3 days?
Well, I mean, it's always hard to go past the Emotep charter, right?
It's always hard, yeah.
In terms of the individual talent, I'm wearing the sweatshirt. I am a Pitt grad, and they have a certain defensive tackle who's heading to Pitt that I know has been a ton of fun to watch at Emotep the last 2 years, and Jasir Whittington, Zahir Mathis there too, just incredible. I mean, we saw him last year. That dude just wrecked the game as a sophomore against one of the best offensive lines we've seen in the Mid-Penn, and he made them look like Swiss cheese at times. He's a special player as well. So in terms of those types of talent, you already mentioned Quinn Martin. There's a lot of blue chip talent, like there always is at these levels. But I think if you want to see kind of guys that might be playing in the NFL in a few years, go watch Emotep and go watch St. Joe's Prep, because I mean, we've seen DJ Moore light it up for the Bears this year, and then we've seen the St. Joe's Prep duo of DeAndre Swift and Zacchaeus on the Eagles, and then we see Kyle McCord in the transfer portal. Marvin Harris Jr. is going to be the latest one. If you want to see the next wave of talent from the state of PA, probably watch those games. But even the Whippy, I mean, we've got another year where 6 Whippeal teams are in the state championship games. I mean, I was telling Evan that you don't really kind of get what the football culture is like in Western PA until you get around. It's different up. It is huge up there. They are super hyped to have 6 teams up there. They play their championship games at Heinz Field. I'm calling it Heinz Field.
It'll always be Heinz Field, bottle or not.
Yeah, but the thing is, with those schools, there are always kids from there that are going to be, next level guys. I just saw Cade Giacomelli was getting some real run at Wisconsin the other day, and he had a huge state championship run a few years ago. You're just going to see guys all across the spectrum here that are going to be playing at the next level. I mean, you look at programs from years past, you're finding Pro Bowlers.
Yeah. I'd be fine if McCord wants to go up to Eastern Michigan. We'll take him up there, no problem. Set him up, a couple steaks. We good to go. I like a couple little nuggets. I like the fact that we have an Army recruit and a Navy recruit playing quarterback this weekend with Mikkel Davis, from Imhotep. and obviously Alex Irby.
Well, you have to, and you always have to tell people now
That's so much fun.
When you run around to people and you tell them Alex Irby's committed to Navy, they're like, that's a weird fit, him, pocket passer going to Navy. You guys got to watch the Navy football now. They don't play like they used to anymore.
No.
They play a real modern offense now. And
right.
So it's always fun to see. And so that might open up more Alex Irby's to go to Navy as well. So.
And if they need to shove him in a submarine, he'll get in.
Oh, yeah.
He's 6'4", but they'll get him in there.
Yeah, I just watched Crimson. I just watched Crimson Tide the other day.
Fantastic movie.
He'd do well in that scenario.
Yeah, and obviously too, you mentioned the guys like Clymer. You mentioned a couple other guys, but yeah, I'm excited. Quentin Martin's always exciting for me to watch. I like that. Davis Jr. I think he's a lot to me like Sean Lee.
Yeah.
You just never know what you're going to get, but it's always going to be fun. You're going to get production out of him.
And you're going to get 100%.
Exactly. So those are the guys that we'll be checking out, and obviously there's many, many more. And we start Thursday, 1 p.m., Steel High versus Fort Cherry. Steel High going for their second straight, third and fourth year. And, of course, it'll be the last high school football game of Pennsylvania's all-time leading passer, Pennsylvania's all-time leading touchdown passing guy. And he needs one, correctly?
To tie.
Correct? To tie the state's single-season record of 57 touchdown passes.
Yeah.
Of course, we talked, too, earlier about McDevitt. Stone finished this year at 56, which was pretty damn good. Yeah. Pretty damn good.
He'll have a chance next year.
He will have a chance next year, obviously, to I guess, break all those records. But I don't know. Alex Irby's setting a pretty high bar.
Yeah.
Pretty high bar. So that'll do it for this edition of the PIAA High School Football Report podcast. I want to thank Dan Sostek, Evan Wheaton, of course, you guys for joining us here. Get out there, Cumberland Valley High School over the next 3 days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 2 championship games each day. It'll be a lot of fun. Should be some food trucks, some good eats, merch, all that good stuff. So, and hopefully the weather holds up. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.